And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, deep in this heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership at coalitionradio.us, where you can find our civil liberties blog, as well as links to our YouTube and our Spreaker podcast pages. Our first guest of distinction tonight has only got a limited amount of time to be with us, so let's jump right in. Anyone who's watched this show over our last 6 years understands that our concern with education is paramount to just about every other issue that we face on this show. On a personal level, I believe that as a parent, education is the most important gift that you can give to your child, in addition to a loving home. I also happen to believe that parents ultimately should be the ultimate arbiter of, if you will, guiding, as they get older, your children's educational opportunities. And I also believe, on a personal level, and as a libertarian, that government, sadly, has no role, really, or should have no role, in education. Rhode Island, in particular, is at a crossroads. The Johns Hopkins University team of researchers that visited Rhode Island this past year found deplorable conditions, not just structurally in terms of the schools, brick and mortar, but also in terms of the performance of children at this school, creating, if you will, as I call it somewhat controversially, an educational holocaust here in the state. We've got schools in this state that perform at a sub 10% achievement level based on a, shall we say, an achievement objective that is not challenging, to say the least. It's my contention that we are graduating an entire generation of students from a variety of economic backgrounds who are essentially functionally illiterate. None other than the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the Washington Post have weighed in at the editorial level, not the op-ed, but the editorial level, pointing out the failures of Providence schools. So rather than, as some of my compatriots would do, rather than obsess with, pointing fingers, although astonishingly at the city of Providence level, there's been none of that. There's been no accountability since the reports were issued. We were trying to come up with solutions. It is my great pleasure and honor to have joining us tonight Robert C. Enlow. He's the president and CEO of EdChoice. Of course, he can be found at edchoice.org. Before the establishment of EdChoice in 2016, as you can imagine, I'm taking this directly from the website, he was an integral part of the Milton and Rose Friedman Foundation for Educational Choice. He served as a fundraiser, projects coordinator, vice president, and executive director prior to being named president and CEO of the foundation in 2009. Under his tutelage and leadership, if you will, EdChoice has become one of the most successful and respected organizations advocating for educational choice. He's worked in dozens of states to propose solutions that are based on performance, as well as theory and philosophy. The organization is actively disseminating research, actively involved in training, actively sponsoring seminars, conducting advertising, and essentially providing grassroots support for folks across the nation, regardless, again, of geography, regardless of economics, with the tools necessary to promote educational choice so that our children can exceed. It's always been my contention that all kids are great kids, but ultimately they need to be given opportunities and the tools necessary, to not just become great kids, but become fulfilled adults. Again, an astonishing background, including working in England, where he has worked literally amongst the poorest in England, providing educational opportunities at places like St. Botolph's Project, providing care and services to homeless men, women, and families. So the folks that we're having on tonight to discuss this aren't simply, shall we say, theorists operating at an ivory tower, pointing down to the nattering classes below and coming up with the idea du jour on how to right the ship. Our guest has spent years in the trenches actively working in education in some of the most direst circumstances. On top of that, he attended Oxford University. So, first of all, I'd like to welcome you to the Coalition. Thank you so much for joining us on a Friday night as we approach the holidays. We're grateful for the opportunity to chat with you. You have worked in an astounding array of educational opportunities, yet there seems to be one constant, and that's the need for choice. Tell us about how you got involved in this, how this essentially became your life's work, and why, and if you could define educational choice, and why is it so critical for children, well, not just in the United States, but anywhere?
I appreciate that, Pat, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. So I was very lucky in life, right? Like many people around our state, our country. I got born into a family that had the ability and the means to choose. And so I went to public school early on through sixth grade, and then I got sent to boarding school out in Long Island. Back then boarding school was a bad thing to do, right? It was you were in trouble. But I went there, and it was this incredibly elite place, and I got there through no merit of my own, but just because my family could afford it. And I said to myself, there seems to be something wrong here. There seems to be something unjust. There was no diversity. There was certainly no income diversity. There was very little racial diversity. And so what's wrong with this picture? Why am I having access and capability of getting access to this incredible education, right? Where I'm in the 7th grade and reading Homer, and I'm in this 8th grade and reading all of Dante, all right? And all of these incredible experiences I had struck me as this was wrong. There was something wrong that we couldn't enable every family to have that. And so that began my life's work of basically trying to find out what the problems are and find out what the solution is. And my view of choice is very simple. I want the families who move from one public school district to another when they buy a house, I just want them to have the same opportunity to go to any school. Right? The goal here is that we should allow families the freedom to go to whatever school type they want, whether that's public, private, charter, at home, online, or 1,000 ways we haven't thought about here. Our goal is to truly empower families with the means to be able to get the education that's best for their kids. And in the future, that may be something like, I'm going to spend 3 days in a public school and 2 days in a private school, or maybe 1 day online and 4 days at a charter school. We haven't really begun to break up what the problem is, and what you've learned in Rhode Island is that the problem, right, that you're facing is a systemic one that is incapable to be solved by government, right? Mm-hmm. So you've seen through the Johns Hopkins report that the kids are performing at abysmal levels, that there are safety concerns, that school leaders are not set up for success, that parents are marginalized and demoralized, that kids can barely 20% proficiency in math. This has been going on for decades. And the only reason it's going on is because parents don't have the financial means to get the heck out of Dodge. And so the goal here is to allow all families the freedom to move, and particularly those families who need it most. I say this all the time. People who oppose the idea of school choice, whether it be education savings accounts or school vouchers or tax credits or any other way to get families more options, they oppose them because it says it takes money away from our public school system. Well, that's rubbish, first of all, because in Providence you're giving $17,000 a kid to get 20% proficiency, and the average private school in Rhode Island cost a K-8 school cost about $6,000.
Right.
So the goal here, Pat, is to have a wide array of choices and options for families, because that's what they need and that's what they want. And every child needs something different. They need some place that they can fit in, and not every single school environment works for every single child. So even the proposed takeover by your governor of the school system is not going to solve the problem, because the problem is, in fact, that the only delivery mechanism for education for most families is a traditional public school, which, by the way, they call a neighborhood school, but often isn't actually in your neighborhood. What we want is more local control, more family control, and the money to follow kids.
At what point in time did this seemingly unbreakable linkage occur in our history where our entire taxing system here, in terms of property taxes in most states, our government, in terms of this independence, if you will, from all accountability with many, many school boards. And again, many school boards are well-meaning. Some of them are actually run very efficiently. But by and large, particularly here in Rhode Island, they are, to use your words, abysmal failures. When did this unbreakable linkage take place? And why do you think philosophically, historically, we can't seem to move beyond that?
Well, so this is a great question, and one that goes back to, if you really want to go all the way back to 1647. But let's go forward a little bit more. So our linkage, here's who you can blame. You can blame Thomas Jefferson for part of this, right?
Okay.
So Thomas Jefferson said that we should allow for a sum of property tax to pay for the building of schools. Mm-hmm. Now, his idea for schooling was only children of elite families should get it, and free children, not children who were slaves or not women, right?
Right.
But the idea was that you tax yourselves. Now, after that, along comes Horace Mann in the 1840s and James Blaine, and they basically say, hey, schooling should be taught in a common way, because they didn't like Catholics, right? It's very interesting. If you look at the rise of our modern public schools movement, right, and the common schools movement in the 1840s, there was a wave of immigration that was coming into our country from, guess where? Greece and Spain and southern Italy and Ireland. All the poor countries, right? The immigrants that weren't from the proper European type of nations. And people didn't like that. They didn't want papism to be taught. And so Horace Mann got together with a bunch of his groups of folks and said, let's start this common school movement. Now, guess where he learned to get this idea from? He went and visited Prussia and found that the Prussian classrooms were set up in rows where children were in desks and the teacher was in front. So this is essentially what happened. So he made it, so Jefferson linked it to property tax. Horace Mann basically created a system where your classroom looks the same, and then he said you have to go based on where you live. And for a while that worked because there were 100,000 school districts in 1930. But today there are 13,000, and so you centralize the problem tremendously. And so now not only do you have a requirement that you have to go where you live, it's free at the point of delivery, you now actually are taught in a certain way, in a standardized way, and that actually is what the federal government has been coming in and doing, right? So now they come in the 1960s and say it's time for, or 1950s, it's time for us to come in and tell you how to teach. And so you have this incredible growth of a monopoly over time, to the point where now it's almost impossible to get a holistic review of quality, right? You're gonna have some traditional schools which are great, but the system is never going to be allowed to innovate in the way it needs to innovate. And so it's a long-term problem here, and the solution has to be So Milton Friedman's idea was very simple. You separate the government financing of education from the government running of schools. And so we believe in the government financing of education because it's really important. I just don't think we have to have government-run schools. Perfect example of this. In the 60s, when Kennedy said we're going to go to the moon, right? And we put billions of dollars of taxpayer money into it. What did he do? Did he say, I'm going to take billions of dollars of public funds because we want to go to the moon and make the government create the rocket? No. He gave it to Raytheon, he gave it to Lockheed, and they gave it to all the private companies and the other companies that got together to try and solve problems to get to the moon. And so this is exactly what we're talking about. We should fund education but not run schools.
Under the Carter administration, if I remember correctly, you had the onset of the Federal Department of Education.
Yes, so the Carter administration made it a cabinet-level position. The actual first law was in 1867, and it actually was a small department, and it was, and if you know education, you'll hear the language here which is used. There was a department that was set up to collect data on the condition of education. And actually, that's the annual document that the United States Department of Education puts out every year, the general condition of education. So it was 1867, but it wasn't a cabinet level department until 1970, under Carter, 1980, sorry.
Now we flash forward to the 21st century. And
Yeah, we spent a lot of time now back in the old days. So let's go to the 21st century.
all right, we've come to understand that many children learn differently, whether it be neurological / medical conditions like dyslexia, whether it be any one of the vaunted and serious alphabet soup of ADHDs, ADDs. Children process and read differently. How is it possible in the 21st century that we would still ascribe significant a one-stop, one approach to education? And why would we think that it would be efficient to be administered at a high top-down government approach? How is that possible?
Because I think we have confused what we've experienced in education with what the purpose of education is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. So we've allowed, and you're starting to see this disconnect with government in other areas, right? Now, let me explain what I mean. So we are now clearly in an age where we need criminal justice reform, right? You've seen it, we all done it. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason for that is because the government on the back end, right, of a child's life has been oppressive as all get out on the way they treat children, particularly children who are poor, children who are black, right? It's been awful. And everyone knows that the government has not provided the level of service necessary and needed. And yet there's a disconnect because on the front end, people are willing to hand their kids to the same government that will screw them over on the back end.
Right.
And so one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is how is it that we allow ourselves, and part of it is because of good old gerrymandering, and I'll tell you what I mean. When a wealthy family can pick up and move and go where they want, they don't really need to care about anyone else. And rightfully so. They should care about their own kid. I have no problem with that. But the problem is the system is set up to actually help those families who can move and not those families who are left behind. And so the very nature of public education has been subverted, I think, because it's not really serving the public interest anymore. And the public interest would be to create a publicly funded system of opportunities, regardless of where families go.
Mm-hmm. And in effect, in my opinion, it's being held hostage by what I call the educational industrial complex, where it would appear that the real focus of many public school departments is on supporting a network of hanger-ons, consultants, an entire industry of people who are more dedicated to analysis of education than actually impacting and delivering an education to students.
Well, yeah, let me give you a perfect example of that, right? Mm-hmm. So between 1950 and 2015, American public education saw a 100% increase in the number of students. So 100% increase in the number of students, right? So doubled. A 241% increase in the number of teachers, and a 709% increase in the number of non-teachers.
Wow.
So in that period of time, between 1950 and 2015, you basically 7 times the amount of student enrollment, you increased administrators. Mm-hmm. And so now you have, like, I'll never forget this, you have someone who is a video monitor, right? Which they do is they bring in video carts to classrooms. Mm-hmm. That's their entire job, right, in some school districts. You have school districts that still have brick masons, right, that still have stenographers.
Right.
And these are hired groups, right? And so one other question we have to ask ourselves is, how can we get to the 21st century in education if we're not willing to actually get out of the way we deliver the product of education, the way we're doing it, right? And that's basically saying the schools are required to do everything. And that's just not what it should be. The schools should be educating our kids in an environment that works and letting the families and the communities solve all these other problems. And in fact, now what they do is they blame parents for the problems in the schools. I say this all the time. This system of education is the only place I've ever seen where the provider of a product can blame the consumer of a product for the failure of a product. Right? So just think about that.
That's very well said. I'm going to steal that, by the way. That's outstanding.
Right? And so if you look at Rhode Island, right? So if you look at this in Rhode Island's time, in the same period of time, in the last, actually between 2000, what is this chart? I've been looking at a chart on edchoice.org, between 1992 and 2014. The state of Rhode Island saw a 0% increase in the number of students, a 1% increase in the number of teachers, and a 30% increase in all other staff.
God bless the Full Employment Education Act.
Yeah, so you want the same people that just hired 30% non-teachers to go and fix the schools that are failing kids.
Right. The very people that brought us to this moment in history, and somehow they are going to have this deathbed conversion to educational responsibility and turn the ship around. Yeah, it's and to this day, post the release of the Johns Hopkins report, I'm not aware of any significant firings or changes in personnel other than the head of the Rhode Island Department of Education, who instigated the study, if you will, as part, of my understanding, a condition of her new employment. All credit to her.
Yep.
Now, here we have ed choice, educational choice, school choice is an incredibly, if you will, vague, I don't want to say a vague term. I guess it's been misappropriated by all sorts of folks to use for their own purposes, political, educational, or otherwise. So how would you define your interpretation, your fine organization's interpretation of school choice? What does it mean to you?
That's great. To me, it means that any child or any family can take the public dollars that are set aside for them and go to whatever educational environment works best for them, right? It's a really simple concept, right? All dollars should follow all kids to all school types and all opportunities, right? Mm-hmm. That's what school choice means to me, right? It means giving parents the ability to get their children in where they fit in. It means allowing them. So my idea of the purpose of education is different from yours. I want my child to fulfill their best need. I want them to become their best them, right? I want my child to become its best possible person. That may not be what other parents want. And so we put them all in a one-size-fits-all system, and that's just not what it's supposed to be about. School choice is and in fact, it shouldn't even be called school choice. It's really parental freedom, right? Mm-hmm. It's a parental opportunity. It's basically saying the money that we set aside for education should go to the families to go wherever they want. And now I always hear this too. This is my favorite one. Well, you can't give billionaires, money to go to private schools. And I'm like, but you're happy with giving billionaires free money to go to gated, segregated community schools? I mean, we have it backwards here in the way we think about how to solve the problems of education.
I'm listening to you talk, and I'm having a little bit of an out-of-body experience because I'm reflecting on how members of said same educational industrial complex typically characterize, I'm not making this personal to you, but characterize folks in your movement, and a movement, full disclosure, that I embrace wholeheartedly. Folks would literally see you or portray you as standing next to the rails, tying our children to the rails, twirling your mustache and going, the train's coming, we'll get them, and with bags of loot that you're walking away. It's what's astonishing.
Yeah, except those same people, mm-hmm. you know who don't. Here's interesting. You know who supports school choice? If you look at the public opinion polling, it's people who are poor and low income and children and families of color.
Right.
Right. They want the educational freedom that white folks have had for years. And you know who doesn't support school choice right now? White, educated Democrat suburban voters. Now you tell me what is wrong with that picture.
Right.
Right? And what's wrong with that picture is if we're really going to have an empowering society, if libertarian, I mean, this is why one of the reasons why I'm drawn to the libertarian idea, right? Mm-hmm. Is because if we're going to empower society through customization and options and opportunities, this is what it's all about. It's about equalizing a playing field, right? And that's what the irony is traditional public schooling says, well, we are the great leveler, we're the equalizer of the playing field. But in fact, there is more income segregation in America because of traditional public schools, and in some cases, there's more racial segregation. Mm-hmm. And so the reality is private school choice or any school choice, any educational opportunities will change that dynamic because the money doesn't belong to the school, it belongs to the taxpayer and the family.
Right. And there's an institutional racism present that seeks to deny the impact on clearly targeted classes of people, racial and economic, that ignores that reality on a day-to-day basis. You clearly have a group of people who are married to a philosophical concept, and to them that supersedes the importance of education to an entire group of folks who have been marginalized literally since birth, and as a result are essentially imprisoned by their inability to get the training and the skills that they richly need and are richly capable of. It's breathtaking to watch. And so the very people, and this is the deep-seated irony here, the very people that would benefit by most, we are quote unquote protecting them from the evils of quote unquote corporate education, because ultimately the only legitimate tie-in with the corporate world is the fact that under your scenario, and we'll get into some specific instances in a second, you are introducing the dreaded competition word into education, aren't you?
Yeah, well, so I mean, I just think about opportunity, and I want to make a couple points on what you said. One, the people in the system are amazing, right? Teachers are amazing. They're working their butts off every day, right? Some of them are better than others. I mean, like everything, there's good, there's bad. The problem is we have created a structure that is inherently incapable of solving the problem, right? We've created this monopolistic structure. And remember, I come from the radical left side of the world, so I'm a liberation theologian by training, right? So I'm as radical left when I grew up as I could be, right? And this is absolutely what the sort of liberation theologians in the left wing would say to you is, this is a government-run monopoly and it's terrible. It's oppressive. And that's what it is. Now, the other thing I'll point out to you is we spend $760 billion in K-12 education in America every year, right? And I would like you to know about 50% of that goes to for-profit companies already from public schools, maybe 40 to 50%. Textbook companies, busting companies, cleaning companies, name your poison, architects, builders. These are not non-profit organizations or things that don't get money. The reality is our traditional public school system is probably the greatest privatizer we've ever seen. It's just the privatizer of the group that they like, right? And so what we want to do is, again, separate all that power from the system and give it to families.
Yeah, and you look at the emergence in the economic power of companies whose sole focus is curriculum, and that should tell you enough on just how much money is being made, again, by hand-chosen curriculum companies, of who are of the let's just say the curriculum du jour, and so it just increases the expense while you have these wild convulsions between approaches on any given year. Reggio Math one year, who knows next year? It's astonishing to watch. Now, within the school choice,
name me any other thing in America where we say you don't have the freedom to go where you want to go.
Right.
Right? By the way, the biggest school voucher program in America, you know what it was called? It was called the GI Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944.
Wow, great point.
Right? The GI Bill and Pell Grants are vouchers. They allow families to go to private schools, right, using public money. That's all we're talking about here. Children getting in where they fit in. And so, look, ultimately this is about making sure families have the opportunities they need so that their children can be the best them. Because that's what it's about. So I really appreciate you and everything you do, by the way, and appreciate you bringing this issue up.
No, and so on the range of school choice, we look at, on one hand, charter schools, and then on the other hand, I'll call it the other side of the range, you look at ESAs, educational savings accounts. And in the next hour, we have a guest. We've had folks from Goldwater before who have been instrumental in implementing educational savings accounts. Where does your organization fall in within that spectrum?
Yeah, so we believe in fact, with Goldwater, we were one of the first people to support education savings account, and that piece of research that he's gonna talk about was funded entirely by EdChoice.
Oh, okay.
So we are one of the first organizations to promote it ourselves, Goldwater and Heritage, and it's the way of the future, right? It is the way that we should be thinking about how we do education. I mean, I foresee an education world where kids can be competent based on what they know, not where they go. And so I'm hoping down the road that I could customize my grandchild's education so that maybe they're going to a college by the time they're 10, in the 10th grade. right? They're getting college courses, and I can afford that because I've got an education savings account.
Right.
And what you're going to find out from the research that we funded in Arizona is that families who who the families who are benefiting most from this program are low-income families.
Right. Ultimately,
So-
because you're giving them for the first time literally a ticket out of what is a failed, I'll call it a prison. And so it's and again, the results, when we discuss them, people are going to be astonished, because when we were faced with the Johns Hopkins report here, in a sense, for folks who have a libertarian approach to education, it was a moment of what I call tragic liberation. And it's tragic because things have fallen to this point. They've literally, I think we've hit rock bottom. I'm not sure if it's possible to fail children at a higher level. But at the same time, it allowed us to portray, what's the term, inconvenient truths from Mr. Gore?
Yep.
The inconvenient truth is that, again, are you married to a system that's completely failed, can be construed as racist, is certainly the ability to deliver private education. Because here's the dichotomy. One of the finest imports we have in this nation is our higher education system. And our higher education system, in terms of college and trade schools, is literally a destination for the entire planet. Yet even the state schools, by and large, operate in a similar model, if you will, to the private universities in America, which are amongst, again, the finest on the planet. We're blessed here in Providence to have schools like Brown University and the Rhode Island School of Design, who literally attract folks from around the planet. And yet,
That's right.
How do you have, in a single, I'll call it overarching educational system, how do you have such desperate failure mixed in with such astonishing success? And what's happening, obviously, at the higher education level is that our children in America are no longer well equipped to compete at the Browns, the Columbias, the Harvards, the MITs. The schools are legion, but the point being, we've created this ghetto effect, if you will, this wall around private universities of the highest level, that we are institutionally preventing our children from being able to attain. Mix in with that the notion that, again, dyslexia is a huge problem here in Rhode Island. There's been all sorts of state legislation that is supposed to enforce tutoring and teaching availability for children who are dyslexic, who traditionally have very, very high IQs and can often behaviorally be impacted because we don't have an approach that's being implemented. If in fact the private schools can be allowed to prosper, here's the killer point, and please jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, if in fact in any business, whether it be schools, and yes, I just call schools a business, all right, if any product or service there is available cash flow, the private sector will rise up and provide alternatives by competing with each other that will be superior simply because of the process of competition. And the ultimate irony here, and I'd love your thought on this, is that one of the primary beneficiaries will be those great teachers you just discussed, because for the first time in generations, there will be competition to hire the best teachers, as there is competition in literally every other product or service we use on this planet.
And I appreciate that comment, and I understand it, and I appreciate how people think about it. But you know what? I just want kids to get in where they fit in. Mm-hmm. I really don't care whether it's because of competition or it's because of this or that. I just want to create an environment where families can access the kind of a school that I went to, mm-hmm. that I got lucky enough to go to just because my mom could afford it. And that's what I care about most, and that's what I know you care about most. And is a benefit, is a side benefit of that we're going to get everyone better, is the whole rising tide is going to lift all boats? Yes, absolutely. But really what I want is I want a just system of education for all families. Now, that's what I care about.
Now, I know you've only got a couple minutes left. What I want to focus on for a few minutes, and we hope to have you on again, is if you will, the value not only of your organization, but let's just take it at its most easily accessed level, which is your website. And your website is a wealth of information about the status of a variety of initiatives, whether it be educational savings account, performance levels. Your website is rich with information so that not only educators, professionals in the field, but also parents, ordinary folks can access it. You know, it's very accessible, it's very well done. Tell us a little bit about the website and some of the things, information that you offer to people as a result of your ongoing research.
Yeah, so it's edchoice.org, and what you can do, and it's built to be friendly for everyone. If you're a family and you live in the state with a school choice program, you can find out whether you qualify by clicking on our dashboard. If you're a media person and you want to find out how many kids have gone into a school choice program over time, you could go to our website and download the data chart for, let's say, the state of Rhode Island, right, and how many people choose. If you're a researcher and you want to find out what the academic impact of the Indiana School Choice Program is, or the parental satisfaction of the Arizona program, you can go to our website and find this out. And so, it really does create an opportunity for everyone to access the information they need, and particularly families. We get literally hundreds of calls from families saying, "Can I qualify? Do I qualify? Where do I go?" And so that all comes on our website, and you can find that. And it's also, we have a group of people that do training and events. So we will always come out, and if people ask us to come out, we will come out and speak. We'll bring speakers. We actually helped over 270 people last year, 270 events. We provided speakers for 270 different events, almost one a day, right? And so our organization is lucky enough to be able to do this and be a support for groups on the ground, and much like anyone in New York State. So we're happy to help.
And I guess final thought: what if you were to give a report card grade right now to the state of school choice nationwide? How is it actually going? Is it we're familiar now that through your site, ironically, which where I initially came in contact with the organization when I was doing research on ESAs. We now know that ESAs are starting to spread across the nation. But are you happy with the progress? Is it slow and steady?
Great question. It is slow and steady, but I give us a C. And that's because we're still stuck in this idea of reforming, right? We need to reform education, people say. That's actually not what I want. I want to transform education, right? Mm-hmm. When we think about reform, we essentially leave the system the same, and we essentially make that permission is required and obtained, right? If you transform it, you're starting with the values that people care about. You're starting with you're not saying I want to be left with the same system, and innovation is permissionless, right? And so I think we've come a long way, but we've got a lot longer way to go, and I'd like to do it before I pass.
Well, your entire life's work has actually been finding ways to bring education to folks who probably never had the type of options that so many of us had, and it's astonishing good works and good deeds. How can folks get in contact with the organization? How can they support it if they're in a position to?
We'd love that. So again, the best way to access us is go to edchoice.org. Mm-hmm. My email's on there. You can email me directly, Robert Enlow at rcenlow@edchoice.org. Happy to take any support, questions, criticism. We engage with everyone.
Right. I want to close on this note, and I'm so grateful for you taking the time to do this. And we hope you'll make it to Rhode Island, because we are, if you will, I think it's fair to say, a target-rich environment for your philosophy and your work ethic. Lord, we need the help. If I could put up up in the sky a Batman-like logo, and you folks would magically appear, we would be great. I just want to read your favorite quote, and again, this is directly off of edchoice.org. The tragedy and irony is that a system dedicated to enabling all children to acquire a common language and the values of U.S. citizenship, to giving all children equal educational opportunity, should in practice exacerbate the stratification of society and provide highly unequal education opportunity. And of course, that's Milton Friedman.
Absolutely.
Here's
the way I'd put it in my own words. Mm-hmm. The system of power is distributed unequally, and it needs to be changed.
Excellent.
So I appreciate you very much, Pat, and I thank you so much for having me on.
Robert Enlow, he is the president and CEO of EdChoice. Of course, that's at www.edchoice.org. It is a site rich in philosophy, rich in background, rich in data. If you are a parent, you are a grandparent, you need to spend some time on this website so that we can essentially break free of possibly, what's the most overused term this year? The status quo. It's not time for reform, it's time for transformative change. And I have found few resources as adept at promoting this on so many different levels as your organization and your website. So thank you, God bless you for your work, and let's talk soon.
Thanks so much. Talk to you again. Thank you.
edchoice.org. That's, ultimately, as a state, we are looking to, and I'm not looking to indict individuals or personalities. If we continue to look, though, to the same people, the same philosophies, if I can even dignify our education in this state with the term philosophy, if we're looking for, if you will, again, a deathbed conversion, it's not happening. There has nothing has occurred, publicly at least, since the onset, if you will, and I use the term onset intentionally, of the Johns Hopkins report, to suggest that other than superficial changes to some bricks and mortar, other than lipstick, if you will, on the proverbial pig, in the form of a rush series of basic fundamental repairs, that nothing is happening other than a lot of meetings. Again, I'll assume that these folks are well-intentioned. A lot of conversation, no dramatic change. During this process, folks have alluded to up to a 10 years before we can, really start to see improvement. Balderdash, are we going to lose another 10 years worth of students? Students who, by all account, are great kids, for whom adults continue to fail. We quote this a lot in this show. The hero of the 19th century cartoon Pogo was wont to quote, "I have seen the enemy and he is us." I don't know if there's a single situation here in Rhode Island, despite all the corruption, all the chaos, which best epitomizes that than our school systems. We have the capacity for overnight transformative change. We simply lack the political will. And I can only appeal to whoever happens to hear this, to people to summon the collective outrage of a generation of parents who now look to their children in their teens who are incapable of competing, if you will, in a 21st century global community. The will is there, the strength is there, the character is there, the fundamental skills are there. But if you've been left behind, as tens of thousands of Rhode Island students have, by school union leaders who, incredibly enough, despite their job focus being working conditions for who were shocked and appalled, surprised by what was revealed in the Johns Hopkins report. If you're looking at school administrators in an industrial complex of competing values who sincerely see children as a necessary inconvenience to highly profitable businesses, we need these kids to be around because, well, how do we justify all the money that we spend? If we don't achieve through sheer outrage the transformational change necessary, then we will continue to wallow in both a moral and economic abyss. We're going to take a few moments now. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the Naked City. Hey, next Friday, you have an opportunity to get down to Thayer Street. The good folks down there are going to be holding winter festivities. It looks like one heck of a lot of fun. We'll be supplying you the link at facebook.com/The Coalition Radio and of course at coalitionradio.us. This is one of the most wonderful times to live here in New England. Rhode Island, of course, is the birthplace of the American movement, the birthplace of American freedom, is the birthplace of liberty. So we've got Thanksgiving coming up, and we need not only to celebrate, take a moment to celebrate our heritage, but at the same time, when addressing issues as we do on this show, reflect intensely on that heritage and whether or not we are, quote unquote, maximizing it for the good of all. Our prior guest points out where sadly we are not. Stay tuned. We're going to be back in just a couple of minutes. We've got folks from the Goldwater Institute. They're going to talk about a landmark study which will focus, if you will, on the results of these educational savings accounts on an economic level. And put the lie to the notion that school choice is to benefit wealthy corporations, school choice is to benefit the few, and that somehow we will be failing our students if we do not provide them opportunities and the ability to move the resources necessary so that they can reach their full human potential. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. I want to continue our conversation, and let's get right down to it. His time is limited, but I'm grateful for him taking time on a Friday evening and joining us. Matt Bienenberg is the Director of Education Policy at the Goldwater Institute. Now, of course, if you listened to the show in the past, you know that the Goldwater Institute has blessed us over the years now with guests from any one of their functioning organizations, whether it be their investigative reporting, their think tank, the group that implements policy, if you will. I always call it on a modular basis. They can come to your state and work with legislators in your state to implement working legislation tailored to your constitution, if you will, and make real effective changes in the quality of life and the opportunity for liberty of people at every level. Again, an astonishing resume, working at literally every level of K-12 educational policy. He has an undergraduate degree from the fabulous Claremont McKenna College. Summa cum laude, yikes. He's also got a master's in public administration, public affairs from Princeton University. Matt, welcome to the Coalition. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, now, the beauty of this study, and we provided links to it on our Facebook page, and we're going to be focusing on this for quite some time, because data like this, I'm not sure has existed, because very simply, the educational reform and the transformative change that educational savings accounts have provided are still relatively new, if you will, to the educational frontier. I will tell you my experience as someone who's an activist in the state of Rhode Island, a libertarian, who frankly believes in getting government out of education as quickly as possible. I see these as an incredible vehicle in order to move choice, not just from the range of folks who are able to afford a $30,000 a year prep school education, but to folks of every income level. Of course, the question that often I'm hit with is, where will they go to schools? My God, there aren't any other schools but public schools. And I point out that given the presence of a dedicated cash flow, which at this point will emanate from government, that the free market will respond and provide adequate competition in the form of alternative privately owned schools at an affordable rate. That's always been my contention, in which case I can see the eyes rolling. And, change is hard. Particularly, we are in the bluest part of the country. Rhode Island is the bastion of progressive education reform. So tell us a little bit about your study, because it proves that up to now, it gives living proof of concept to, I believe, one of the great ideas in moving education reform forward with a sense of urgency that it needs. Give us a little bit of background.
Sure. And just for those in your audience who aren't familiar, it sounds like a lot of folks may be, but the Education Savings Account Program, or the ESA program in Arizona, we call it the Empowerment Scholarship Account Program. And it's basically an opportunity that takes part of the public funding that would have gone to send a student in K-12 to a public school and deposits a portion of that into an account for that student's family. Then they're able to use that for anything from special needs therapies to tutoring, at-home curriculum, private school tuition. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of a catch-all opportunity for these families to try and customize an educational opportunity for their student. And so this report that we just released is actually the second in a series that we've been working on this year, and it's focused on the impact of the ESA program on low-income communities in Arizona. So as you said, it's a fairly new program. Arizona was the first in the country to pioneer it back in 2012. Only had about 150 kids that year. It's now increased up to about 6,000, 6,500. So really some tremendous growth, but obviously it is still a young program with not quite as much data behind it as some of the more established programs. And so this report was really an attempt to dive into and say, can we look at what really is behind this? And so, one of the big findings from the report was about how the ESA program actually is offering educational access to students all across the economic spectrum. And I know when you were speaking with Robert earlier, you guys were talking about the way that private schools operate. And a lot of people kind of have this notion of, well, private schools are only there for very well-to-do families. These cost $20,000, $30,000 a year. And so something like the ESA program, which offers students about $6,000 for a student without special needs, gives them about $6,000 a year. We hear this claim that says, well, that's just not enough money to help a family unless they're already, wealthier and can afford this. And so what we were able to show in this report is that ESA award, those $6,000, is actually enough to pay for the majority of private school elementary tuition costs in Arizona. So the median private school elementary tuition cost in Arizona is actually less than what families are typically getting through the ESA program. And the reason that's significant is that means you don't need to be, a family of independent means with wealth outside of the program. If you're in this program and you're able to participate in it, this can, as you said, kind of be your ticket to another opportunity for education.
What type of, in terms of your study, the students who were involved in your study, what type of performance levels did they come from? What types of homes did they come from? What type of economic circumstances do they live in?
Sure, great question. So some of the very preliminary analyses that had been done, some of the folks in the media had indicated that they kind of were abetting this talking point, saying, well, these must be families that are coming from, again, more well-to-do families, communities where the school districts are performing better. And we did several analyses looking both at the state levels, trying to see, are these coming from school districts and communities that are high performing? Are they coming from higher or lower income areas? And actually found that these students, by and large, mirror the public school population as a whole, meaning these are coming from parents and families that are in high and low performing districts at the same rate as students in the public school system. These are coming from families where the districts have above and below average poverty rates, the same as in the public school district, showing that this is really, a program that's offering access, again, to people across the economic spectrum. This isn't something that's concentrated among the well-to-do. And happy to get more into the details, but again, some of the real interesting findings that we came across were that when you drill down into that and look even further and say, okay, well, what are the specifics? When you look at those school districts that actually have the highest concentrations of ESA students, some of those are the absolute most high poverty and most disadvantaged communities in the state. And so the three, we highlight this, for example, among kind of the case studies, the three districts with the highest concentration of ESA usage in the state of Arizona actually have child poverty rates that are double the state average. So you're talking some of these areas where nearly 1 in 2 students are growing up in poverty, and these are areas with tremendous ESA participation rates.
And what's equally significant, and folks, if you haven't spent time in New Mexico and Arizona, you've got a very strong presence, as one would assume, of Native Americans. And what type of results have you seen from the Native American population?
Sure. So, and again, we did kind of some profiles on several of these. And so when you look at a lot of these Native American districts within the Native American reservations, you find some of these where up to 100% of the schools are rated D and F. The public school spending is $12,000, $15,000, $16,000 a year per pupil, and yet the students in these communities have literally no public school that's available to them that is not failing according to the State Board of Education. And so when you look at the ESA program, you have in several of these districts over 100 students within a single school district participating in this program. And so you're offering these kids essentially sort of an escape valve, again, almost a golden ticket for many of them, to say, you're not just going to be locked into the same system of the status quo. We're offering you an opportunity and the financial means to take advantage of this.
Do you have statewide testing in Arizona? Is there implementation of that?
Yeah, Arizona, as with the other states, does have statewide testing and also an A through F letter grade system. And again, that's one of the areas that, as you look at these communities, you have those coming from the DNF rated communities, such as in those Native American reservations and all across the spectrum.
So is it still too soon to see really generational change in terms of the overall cumulative impact across communities? Are you starting to see talent, or are you able to drill down to analyze communities that might have been just complete baseline, borderline functioning schools? Are you starting to see real change there?
Sure, and that's a great question. So again, the program being only about 7 or 8 years old, there's not any kind of long-term analysis on that. And the statewide testing, that's for the public school system. So that's for the districts and charter schools. What we're able to essentially characterize here is this clearly extraordinary demand for these programs among these communities. And so it's these students where you've seen, again, going from less than 200 students in the program the first year, that having grown exponentially to over 6,000 now. And so we're seeing this demand as parents are voting with their feet, going to many of these programs through the ESA program.
Right now, in a state like Arizona, is the amount of students participating in the program, is it based on budgetary issues? Has it been opened, or is it being gradually opened to the entire populace?
Another very good question. So in Arizona, it's open to several different student groups. And so if you're a student who's coming from any of a number of backgrounds, you're potentially eligible for it. And that's things like if you're a student with special needs, or if your parents have served in the military, if you're coming from the foster care system, if you reside in or previously attended a failing public school. These are the specific areas that are open to students in the program. Arizona had actually, the legislature a couple of years ago, passed what would have been an expansion to bring that opportunity to all students. We had some folks, again, you kind of talk about this media narrative a little bit in portraying the program as saying, well, it doesn't actually help those families. And so that legislation wasn't able to proceed.
Mm-hmm. But the goal ultimately is to make it universal in Arizona.
I mean, so Goldwater is always working to try and find ways both to improve the accessibility of the program and choice in general. So, we're certainly continuing to try and fight this fight for the ESA families and for students who don't have that opportunity.
Now, clearly, one of the most expensive parts of education is special education. And, special education is this incredibly overarching term because it can mean young people facing physical challenges and dealing with ambulatory issues, but it could also mean any one of the, and I use this term with respect. Full disclosure, my wife is Orton Gillingham certified for folks who have children who's dyslexic. You'll be very familiar with that. She has spent a lifetime working with students who have challenges learning how to read. One of the great challenges of dyslexia, if you will, not to obsess over that, but ultimately it's critical to deal with it at a very young age because as they see in the dyslexia biz, in your first few years as a young person, you learn to read, and then ultimately you need to be able to read to learn. So early intervention is critical with children who are dyslexic, particularly because of behavioral issues. A lot of these children have well above average IQs. They're very bright, but as you can imagine, the frustration level reaches that. Have you seen, either anecdotally or through your study, increased competition, increased development of facilities now for children who may learn differently because there is the potential for a dedicated revenue stream to schools like that? Are you starting to see that in either segments or on the general level?
Sure. So there are a lot of providers who do take those special needs students through the ESA program. And one of the things that folks tend to miss a lot of the times when they talk about the public schools and the private schools, there are a lot of public school districts which actually refer students with special needs to private providers. And so, through the ESA program, for example, that's actually the largest single group within the program. It's about 60% of students who are in it have special needs, again, across that spectrum in terms of severity. But yeah, that is absolutely a part of the population that this program has been supporting. Many of the parents we have worked with, parents who've testified on behalf of the program, are those who are potentially working with their kids at home or with the help of kind of different providers and tutors, and really that is one of the core constituencies of people who have just absolutely been seen their children's education transformed by this program.
Right, and it's literally overnight changing laws. I mean, if there was a case of break glass and call a superhero, effectively, and I don't think I'm being dramatic here, you're changing almost overnight the very course of the educational system in Arizona. Has this got broad-based popular appeal? Are you finding a lot of political challenges from? I'll say this kindly because I'm not here to disparage people, but established educational interests. Are they putting up a lot of fight for this, against this?
Sure. So you I'm sure have seen, in states like West Virginia, you actually had the teachers unions staging strikes against the ESA program and charter schools, even the opportunity to establish programs like this, even when additional dollars for education were attached to it. It's very similar in Arizona and other states. Yes, a lot of these groups, do see this as a challenge to the status quo and a lot of political hostility toward it, both within political actors, certain media outlets, and absolutely there's definitely an effort against this, and it's very the contrast is very stark when you compare that versus the parents speaking very candidly about this program and the impacts that it's had on their students and their families.
Yeah, because anecdotally we've all been treated, and I say that with a sad smile, to the pictures of parents waiting overnight to engage in lottery systems of all things in order to participate in charter schools or enhanced levels of educational opportunity. I'll put it out. As I mentioned, and as I always mention, one of the magical components of Goldwater is that your organization takes this multi-pronged approach to introducing liberty and governmental reforms, good government across the nation, investigative reporting, but you've also got this two-pronged approach in the sense that folks like you are actively involved in crunching data, crunching numbers, analyzing results in real time, while simultaneously you've got an organization that is literally able to go on a state-by-state basis, if you will, I'll call it legislative guerrilla warfare, and bring a set of laws and a set of expertise, both constitutional at the state level as well as subject matter experts, and are able to port, if you will, much like a piece of software, legislation that will introduce this into the state's laws. As folks are seeing the success on this, are you getting increased inquiries from different states? Are things so broken, as you're probably aware in Rhode Island, where folks are finally having to confront the realities that you folks on a daily basis portray. Are we there yet?
Sure. So it is definitely a work in progress. Again, Arizona being the first state that had pioneered this, and in the years since, several others, Florida, Mississippi, Tennessee, North Carolina, you've had states that have joined onto this program, and we certainly are in contact and do get requests from other states who, as you just said, they're looking at this and saying, wow, you guys have this program, you have such a landscape of school choice options, and then, having a strong interest in trying to jump on board with that. So yes, it's absolutely something that many other states are, reaching out about and trying to, and that's why, we're so hopeful that, this is sort of a retrospective look when we analyze some of the outcomes or the impacts here in Arizona, but it's also, hopefully something that other states can then look at and say, oh, here's how, Arizona charted the course, and maybe here's something we can look at and point to that data.
Other states have adopted it, and interestingly enough, each of the states that have adopted it do have, if there's one unifying factor with Arizona, they all have a different geography, but they all have significant swaths of very rural, economically challenged school districts. Mississippi, North Carolina, Florida, wonderful places, wonderful people, but a lot of folks, West Virginia, a lot of folks facing really the cycle of poverty that liberty, not to sound cliched, but true liberty, in this case in the form of education, it can help to break in a way that no government program can. Is that a coincidence, or is it a question of political will?
I mean, there's definitely a lot of factors, a lot of kind of windows of opportunity and who the actors are, and, seeing again some of the politics across the different states that definitely plays into it. I do think that you're seeing, a lot of states from the east to the west. And again, it's not simply a rural or an urban type of program. When we came out with this report, again, focusing not only on areas such as the rural Native American reservations, but also then looking at some of the districts in urban Phoenix, the district with the highest percentage of failing schools, and doing a case study on that and finding, more than 100 kids joining the ESA program again from that district, and being able to use that ESA program and pay for the majority of private schools that fall within just a couple of miles of the folks' homes who are in that district. It's absolutely something that I think has broader appeal than simply just one sort of geographic territory.
I would be fascinated to know two things, if in fact, if it comes in the purview of your job in your area moving forward. Number one, the creation of new schools that have been opened specifically to, for lack of a better term, to take advantage of or to realize the opportunity, it's probably a better way of expressing it, in this new revenue stream that's being created. Because really, ultimately, in any business, in any service, a revenue stream is introduced, the market, I'm convinced, will rise up to meet it. Do you see any of that yet? And I guess the other question is, do you folks have plans in the near future to study the law's impact in other states? I know Arizona is your home state. It's a natural petri dish for what you folks are working on. Sure.
Yeah, and to your first question, for example, the concept of micro schools is something that's taken off here in Arizona. Sort of very small, sort of conglomerations of students coming together, and a lot of those have taken advantage of something like the ESA program, for example, where they're not getting, they're not sponsored through a district, and yet they're able to organize these small sort of co-ops almost of students and small communities of instructors, creating these schools and these opportunities, and being able to take advantage of the ESA program, for example, really is something that can help facilitate that. And I do think certainly when it comes to talking about other states that, as these programs continue to evolve and we continue to have more data that we're able to analyze, absolutely continuing to tell that story.
Do school districts or school systems, or you call them micro schools, do they have to, are they able to erect roadblocks to taking ESAs? Do they, or does the law specifically say, if in fact this person's eligible for an ESA, that they can use it?
Sure, and a great question. So the ESA program tries very hard to both promote flexibility while also not, trying to micromanage the individual schools. And so, we get this question a lot. Well, does this mean that you're not taking, many of these disadvantaged students with special needs? And again, that's where we point and say, it's sort of an interesting question when you look and see 60% of the kids through that program are those with special needs, often some of the ones who are, most poorly served within the traditional school setting. And so it's something that really has offered opportunity, not just to some cookie cutter, case, but really students who have very unique needs and are able to benefit from the program.
And I know you've got some plans this evening, and again, we're grateful for your time. Is once the legislation's actually passed, is this an expensive program for a state to run? I mean, is there some overwhelming bureaucracy necessary in order to implement this?
Sure. Again, so actually the first report that we put out, kind of part one of the series, a large portion of the findings and the research on that was about the fiscal impacts of the program, both in terms of what it offered to families, but then also its impact on taxpayers and state government. And so just to put that in context, in Arizona, the per pupil spending, when you look at total taxpayer resources, is about $10,000, $11,000 per year. And again, for a student in the ESA program, you're looking at about $6,000. So there are a few $100s that go toward administration of the program per student. There's about a 5% set aside that's redirected for potential administration of the program. But when you look at it in terms of the actual cost, this is something, again, the idea is you're taking a portion of what taxpayers would have spent. And so part of it goes to the family and part of it is essentially taxpayer savings. And interestingly, in Arizona, also highlighted in that first report, is the fact that in Arizona's ESA program, it actually redirects about $600 of funding back to the public school every time a student leaves the public schools and goes to the ESA program. The way the funding formula works in Arizona, it actually increases per pupil funding for the remaining students in public schools.
Because that belies the rather perverse notion that has been used like a club over taxpayers, is that, and by the way, for full disclosure, neither of my children ever set foot in a public school. And I was astonished recently that I and a few other people who could claim that, and we don't have ESAs here in Rhode Island, so sadly that was out of pocket, that somehow I was responsible for hurting the school because I was taking money away from them. That, while one state legislator said that I should be, I and other folks should be given sort of a hero's welcome, how folks in the educational biz, that educational industrial complex, as I like to call it, see me as a problem. How is that possible?
It's a great question. I mean, again, I think it's largely an ideological one where folks just look at this and kind of, draw that sort of conclusion. But I think you're absolutely right.
Well, again, congratulations on the study. The legislation, the concept behind the legislation was critical. The implementation of the successfully passed legislation is critical. Making the efforts to broaden both the funding and the appeal for this legislation is critical. Equally, if not as importantly, if not more importantly on some level, the ability to look in real time, something that doesn't appear to be possible when it comes to conventional education systems, because we're often told we need a 10 or 20-year window to look at data. The ability by you and your group to look in real time at immediate impacts, seismic impacts on the lives of young people is astonishing. It's great work, and what you've done here, and it's up to folks in the Liberty Movement, it's up to folks out in the world to, if you will, spread the gospel.
Very much appreciate the kind words, and you give a chance for us to share a little bit of that story and that information.
So again, Matt Beinberg, he is the Director of Education Policy at the Goldwater Institute. Exceptional education, exceptional experience, and in this case, exceptional product and exceptional impact on people's lives. Congratulations, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Have a good evening.
Good night now. And folks, there it is. You can support the Goldwater Institute by going to goldwaterinstitute.org. A life-changing legislation. The question is, how do we port that to a politically unwilling Rhode Island? Again, it's got to be the collective outrage of folks who see firsthand around their kitchen tables at night when their kiddos are doing their homework, or worse yet, 10 or 12 years from now, around their kitchen table when their young children, not so young now, teenagers, young adults, are looking for jobs. Or maybe another few years out when they look to raise their children in Rhode Island and understand that not only is the job market poor, but the educational prospects for their children are poor. It is critical that we engage in transformative change here. It is simply unacceptable to assume that we can continue to have this chattering class who, like leeches on the prospects of our young children, profit extraordinarily, but again, losing an entire generation. A big thank you to both of our guests tonight, Mr. Enlow, Mr. Beinberg, hope I pronounced that correctly, not only for joining us tonight, but for what is clearly not just a job, but an avocation and a calling. How do we get people like that here? How do we spread that message? We'll be sharing this week and, again, trying to turn up the heat on Rhode Island government, but we're a tiny little indie media outlet. We can't do that without your insistence. We can't do that with some of my friends without perhaps dropping their guard and opening their minds to alternatives. Conversation about alternatives, when done by people of goodwill and in good spirit, should never be construed as a challenge or a personal affront. It simply means that, Houston, we've got a problem and we need to discuss it. We're going to take a quick break right now. I'm not sure what the rest of the show holds us. We've got a few folks who are going to be calling in. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, deep, so very deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And of course the mothership, coalitionradio.us, where links can be found not only to our Liberty page, but also to our Spreaker page, where many of these shows will reside as a podcast, our YouTube page, and a variety of reports, publications from any one of a number of good government groups here in the state of Rhode Island. We're going to take a few minutes. We'll be back soon. Thank you. And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, the mothership, coalitionradio.us, where links to our Spreaker, our YouTube, our Civil Liberties blog, all can be found. My name is Pat Ford. I am your host for this evening's activities. Anyone who joined us in the last hour and a half or so understood that we were focusing on educational savings accounts, educational choice. There is nothing more libertarian, I believe, than ripping up the traditional construct between education and government and returning it back to local communities, back to local families, back to parents, and of course, ultimately back to the children themselves, so that they can not only engage in self-ownership, but they can also take ownership of their own personal growth. So as some would say, that's libertarian AF. And that's why we're proud of organizations like Goldwater and edchoice.org, who for years now, quietly, heroically, have been finding ways to return education back to its roots, back to its origin, and back to really why, as a society, we look, again, to stimulate the growth of our children. Someone also who is as libertarian AF is joining me live. I think she's been on once in the last few years, but I wanted to give time to her, both in her, I'll call her personal capacity as a libertarian, but also her campaign activity as a libertarian. She's the vice chair of the Indiana Libertarian Party. She's also the communications director for the Ruff Phillips 2020 campaign. She is also one of what I'll call a handful of super activists, folks whose literal persona, presence, ethos, handprint can be felt on issues across the entire country. Interestingly enough, several of them are first names are Aaron. I don't know if it's the name, I don't know if it's in the water, whatever, but it is my distinct pleasure to welcome back to the Coalition, Erin Pyle. Erin, welcome back.
Thank you so much. It's definitely the name.
Erin Adams, of course, has joined us on the show in the past, and she too, like you, is a force of nature.
I love her. I was actually just on Drunk and Disorderly Tuesday evening with her and Zach and Dre. So yeah, that was. I love my girl. So yeah, it's the name. I'm good with that.
Okay. And by the way, Drunk and Disorderly, if you haven't had a chance to watch it, it's just, it's so anywhere from 2 or 3 libertarians on one screen. Let's just say that there are a variety of behavioral modification devices being employed during the filming of the show, which, as the show goes along, only adds to the festive frivolity, if you will. It is, if you're a libertarian or not, and you want to learn more about it, should be appointment watching. And it's Drunk and Disorderly. Just do a search on Facebook, because I'm pretty sure it's the only Drunk and Disorderly podcast in America.
It's a good show. I actually don't drink, so they were the drunks and I was the disorderly.
You are nothing if not disorderly. But let's take a snapshot in time here. This has been a tumultuous set of weeks here in the libertarian movement, and on a variety of levels. Number one, we've got a tumultuous campaign now ongoing in full force for the chairmanship of the party. We are embarking, if you will, now into full press on the presidential side. And of course, we're coming off of a very successful midterm, I'll call it midterm election series, where somewhere north of 70 plus libertarians have been elected to everything from the Broome County District Attorney, and I won't say down to, across government lines, I'll say, to town councils, water boards, zoning boards, you name it. And the reason I say that is because I think sometimes there's an unfair emphasis placed on what's called higher office. I will tell you that the folks who have been elected to water boards and school boards out of the box are equally patriots in my eyes, and probably will have more of a break glass, add water, instant impact on people's lives, potentially than, I'll even say, some of our high offices, federal offices.
Local legislation impacts our personal lives more than anything else.
Absolutely.
Those are the positions we should be paying attention to. Those are the most important.
So what do you think accounted for the success? You folks saw success in Indiana, and if you want to give any shout outs, feel free. But what's the special sauce we got going on now all of a sudden?
Indiana, we have, I've got to say, it is an absolute honor to be the vice chair for the LPIN. We have some of the most passionate, some of the most hardworking, most giving people in the movement. They dedicate themselves to what they do, and they share the love. And because we're so passionate, and we're more like family, we help each other every chance we get. And because of that, we're able to really impact local areas. I have to say, I'm so proud of all the candidates that were elected in Indiana. We had 5, and on top of that, we had 2 in one county appointed to boards.
Mm-hmm.
So we continue to grow at the local levels, and it's an honor to work for them and a privilege to watch.
When you were on last year, it was always to talk about grassroots.
Yeah.
If you can, and feel free to mention names or not, but talk about some of the individual efforts that went into overcoming an establishment duopoly, overcoming incredible burdens by election laws, overcoming party recognition issues, all of that to actually win an election. It's got to be an astonishing moment.
It's all about touches. It's all about being in front of people. It's all about knocking on those doors. It's about going to the meetings. It's about attending the forums. It's about really getting out there and talking to people and putting out your message. The more you talk, the more people hear you. And the more they hear you, the more they listen and they remember you. You have to really be willing to put it out there. And that's why I'm so proud of all the people who were elected. And I think it's up to 87 right now.
Wow.
So that, yes, which is fantastic. It's great to see people really push the envelope this year. So it's like Christmas for all of us. We got to watch people open gifts, and we were with our families.
No, I think one of the most fun aspects, if you've suffered through as many election nights as you and I have, was that broadcast that folks did. And Nick Sarwark was on it for a while. Dan Fishman was on it. A number of activists on it. Where some of the winners were on it. We actually had our own successful election night programming. Yeah, it was again, talk about out of body experiences. You looked at it and you're like, holy cow. It
was fantastic. I was actually with the LPIN for our election night party up at the Antelope in Indianapolis. So if anybody ever goes to Indianapolis, hit up Brad at the Antelope. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But
Okay.
it was amazing to be with family and to get to celebrate. And Jared Hall and I were there, and we were like tag teaming with the LPIN people and with National, letting them know what was going on. So it was a great night, and couldn't be prouder.
So why now? What's happening now? You're connected to individual groups, candidates around the country. What's happening now that has made this sea change, if you will, and results?
We're becoming bold. We are looking at different strategies. Like Pennsylvania, they just knocked it out of the park. They went after everything that was uncontested, and they just were like, we're going to get it. And they won races, and they were fantastic in that. The other thing is messaging. We're becoming bold when it comes to our messaging. We're standing up for our principles. We're deciding to do things and to go out and be the people, because it's up to us to do it. And if we don't do it, no one else will. And people are starting to know that and feel that and do it. And I think that's a big change.
You mentioned being bold. I also like the word unapologetic.
I love unapologetic. Yes. Yeah, that is one of my favorite words to use, especially with Kim.
Yeah. I mean, right now, I can think back, say, 8-10 years ago, where if someone asked me, and this is personally weak on my behalf, but someone would ask me, well, about school choice. Now, right now, one of my favorite hashtags to use is end public education. I say that on our local media, and I make cases for, like our guests tonight, ESAs and school choice and things like that. 10 years ago, it would have been, yeah, we want to have choice in schools. Yeah, we want to,
don't want to rock the boat, just suggesting.
we don't want to offend anybody.
Yeah.
We don't care about that anymore, do we?
No, and I think that's we're getting to the point where we're just we're ready to stand up for what we believe in and really go bold, and that's what I believe is happening. People are sick and tired of it, and they're ready to do it themselves. And that takes just running for office takes a lot of boldness. Mm-hmm. It really does.
Yeah, because you're putting yourself out there. That's why, at moments like this, when we experience victories as a libertarian community, I always want to do the shout out to the Frank Robinsons of the world, if you will, the guys the men and women who 30 years ago were putting up booths at county fairs, and people were giving them the looks like, "Where's your tinfoil hat?" and
right.
and asking the immortal question, "Roads?" But we're really asking it. It wasn't a joke yet then. Folks were ostracized in a lot of places for thinking, well, with liberty, thinking about individualism, thinking about self-ownership. It wasn't easy for those people 30, 40 years ago. It's not easy now, but it was exponentially more difficult on a social level.
I just got done with the 2019 Indiana election, LPIN election. I was campaign manager for Douglas McNaughton. He ran for mayor of Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. Not an easy race, obviously, but Doug was fantastic, and he was very unapologetic, and he did the work, and he got in front of coalition leaders, and he was in debates. He was even kept out of debates, and it was not done not purposefully. We'll just leave it at that. But he was really able to make some impacts, and when I say he was unapologetic, and he was bold, and we actually had an amazing campaign experience. It was quite positive overall. But I was really impressed. One night we had the Fox 59 debate, and he had just been kept out of the African American Coalition of Indianapolis's debate. We had reached out to them several times, and they kept telling us no. So we had discussed this issue.
I'm curious. Why did they say no? Did they proffer a reason, or?
Basically, because we weren't majority party, a major party. Basically, that was pretty much it. It ended up being a weird situation, and that's perfectly fine. But because of this, Doug and I actually spent some time talking. We talked a lot about legislation and minorities in Indianapolis, and so at the night of the Fox 59 debate, they asked a question, and it was fantastic because they asked how do you see legislation impacting minority residents in Indianapolis? And Doug just had this smile on his face the whole time. And I kind of knew like this was it. We were happy. Because the Democrat incumbent was talking about all the data and, data, right? Really, really heart-wrenching. And,
Right.
and then the Republicans are talking about surveys and how much we needed to invest in surveys to protect the communities and help them, and things we already heard all the time. So when we got to Doug, they said, Mr. McNaughton, and they repeated the question, and he said, and very unapologetically and very boldly stated, I don't need surveys, I don't need data to tell me what is happening. If you want to know what's happening, go out into these communities and speak to people. Go to the schools, go to the jails, go to the streets, go to the businesses. They can tell you what works and what doesn't. And while you're up here in Indianapolis telling them what to do, you're not listening to what actually works for them. He just let it out there. And it was lovely to watch, and it was bold, and he was telling them that they're not listening. And people in the audience loved it. And it was really nice because we got a lot of media attention after that, and they talked about us up until Election Day.
Wow.
It was great.
I was going to say, it's critically important. We celebrate the wins, but we
Yeah.
we also keep in mind guys like Doug, men and women like Doug, because, it's, on one level, it would seem like an insurmountable challenge. On the other hand, folks like him are able to encapsulate the libertarian message and make it accessible. And
And he
and define ourselves.
He was racing with the public, and he's already starting to think about 4 years from now. So he's going to stay active in that level and continue to reach out and continue to work on the message. So I'm really proud of him. And we had so much fun, and we met some great people. Actually, a couple came to our election night party from the debate. So it was great. It was absolutely, the whole season was great to work with him.
Right. Now you have a national profile as well, and
I do. Oh.
you're one of those people at convention now where I've seen people who you haven't met in person, but who are aware of your work. People just walk up to you and just emote, because again there's a group of people, super volunteers, super activists, grassroots, that really transcend the movement itself, and I'm not exaggerating when I say you're part of that, which is why it's critical that not only do you do work for other people, but we celebrate your successes and also find ways to promote you and what you've done for the community. I'm going to put you on the spot here. I don't know the answer to this. Are you contemplating elective office, or is it something you're thinking about?
Not right now. I run like the ballot races, just my name on the ballot, which is, what I do because I'm working for other people, but I want to give people options. And I still do talk every day in my community. So it's not like I'm not running a race. I like to help other people. That's what I want to do. I like working and helping the campaigns that I'm already, I'm working with. And my state party, I love my state party. I like to give them as much of my time as possible.
Yeah, no, I know. And I'm going to make a plea here. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I think someone like yourself, who has worked so effectively on the campaign level, I think someone like yourself should take a chance. And I know family, jobs, all of that is tough. But I would love to see you out on the campaign trail with you as the focus, given your experience and your voice. I just think that would be phenomenal. On a hard-hitting campaign. Maybe just once, sometime in the next couple of years, we should all come for work for you and promote Erin, as opposed to all the behind-the-scenes work you do, helping other people. I'm just going to put that out there. We'll bring that up in the convention, and we'll get the entire body to vote on it. How about that?
Well, I'm so flattered. I happily didn't decline.
We'll work on you. We'll work on that. But the message here, and the message all along has been, and the clear, if there was a winner of a message coming out of, well, it's really just last week or so's events, is that the days of apology are over. The days of excuses or mumbling or sounding like Charlie Brown's parents when the hard questions come up, they're over. And I'm talking about libertarians. It's amazing. And you've seen, I love your comment on this. It's my take that we are asked the most difficult, obnoxious questions of really anybody on the stage. It's almost like they asked the Republican if they could spell cat. They asked the Democrat if it's raining outside. Democrats still can't give us a straight answer. And then they want you or your candidates to formulate opinions on the most challenging subjects of the day. Have you caught that take? Do you see that?
Yeah. It's what we should be prepared for that. We should always be prepared for that. It's politics. If we're not prepared to play chess while they're playing checkers, are we really there ready for the game? So you should always be prepared for those kinds of situations.
Now,
I'm used to it. It's fine.
What do you do? What's in your way the opinion on how to prepare candidates for those difficult? I mean, is it role playing? Is it debate, constant conversation? What do you do to help prepare a candidate for that first time they go out into public, and you got that moment where, someone says something stupid? You guys are just a party of weed, aren't you? How do you prepare candidates for that?
You have to remind them why they're doing this in the first place. Have that talk with them. But I think the most important thing is remind them that they're right. Mm-hmm. They're absolutely right. We time and time again have talked about the issues. Libertarians, while we don't get taken seriously, we have very logical plans. We have very logical policies. The only difference is we don't use government to enforce them. But what we are is factual. That's where libertarians differ. We are very factual people. So we can go out there with confidence, knowing that we're right, knowing that we are working for freedom, and we're not working for more government. So you got to remind them the reasons why. That's the hardest part, is remembering why we do what we do, because we take so many punches day in and day out. But you have to remember the good things, the things that you've been able to accomplish, and the things you've been able to the people you've been able to bring on and to build his family. Those are great things, and that's the reason why we do this, and that's what you got to remind them.
Yeah, and you have to take the moment to savor the good times, because we're about to enter a period of time when we will face challenges like none before. The duopoly has woken up to our sudden presence. Ask the folks in Kentucky how they feel about libertarians right now. Not a variety of them are not real impressed, and if I ruin any of us help to ruin their day, oh well. But they will erect obstacles to our continued progress. They are not interested in facts. They are not interested in the fact that we're right. They're not interested in clear, non-emotional responses to challenging issues. They're
just go out there and be unapologetic. Tell them the facts. Be straightforward. That's what they need. They really need that Band-Aid ripped off. And until someone rips it off, they're going to continue to believe other things. And you're going to be attacked by people, and you're going to have people say that you're wrong and going to say that we're Republicans that smoke weed or Democrats that like guns. And guess what? They're half right. So let's correct them on the other half.
We like weed and we like guns.
Let's just do it. Let's either we're going to do this thing or we're not. So let's do it. That's what I'm telling them. That's what I'm telling them in the back. Just do it.
So how is the campaign going? Now, you're the communications director. I know that you've spent a lot of time organizing. What's your thought on the state of the campaign? Recent entrance, if you will, to the race. At some point, somebody suggested to me that somewhere in the neighborhood of 100+ people had submitted some form of paperwork to the FEC to run for the president. It's some astonishing amount.
Hey, yeah, people want to run. I mean, put the work into it. It's hard. Go for it. I encourage you. Mm-hmm. I mean,
So
Go for it. I never sleep. I like to see other people not sleep. We can all be up all night messaging each other. But no, everything. The campaign is progressing. We are getting more volunteers every day, all across the country. We just added several new volunteers, an AV manager. I'm very excited to work with. We are working with people all across the country and getting them involved on things that really impact them. We talked to a man, and he's writing his story of his immigration to the United States for us. It's a small series, four-piece series that he's writing. And we're so excited to learn from him, as his experience will help us on the things that we want to make sure as a candidate we can utilize within the purview of the position. We think it's important to get the other side of that experience.
right.
So we're getting to really embrace some really great things, a lot of grassroots things that we're concerned about that can impact the federal level, because everybody has a story. We want to know the story.
Right.
We want to know why you're libertarian and why we can be, the spark together to take back our freedom. We have some fun. We have some interesting things planned. We're very excited for, and our team is building every day, which makes me very happy. I get to delegate more work. I like to delegate and tell people what to do. But yeah, and I know there's a lot of people who have who are showing potential interest in running for presidential office, and I know you want to ask me about that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to avoid that question at all.
Well, okay. Well, let's you brought it up.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the most recent, most controversial entree into the election. I mean, full disclosure, I'm a Rhode Islander. I know Lincoln Chafee. I as a state chairman, I wear, like you, I wear a couple hats. Not as well as you, but I wear the hat where it says we're an open party. All are welcome to join us. We ask you that at a very minimum, if you're going to publicly identify as a libertarian, that we ask you to eventually sign on to the NAP, the non-aggression principle, and to hold our statement of principles to be so sacred that it literally is impossible to change them. Unlike the duopoly, which, finger in the wind as to what they believe in, our statement of principles, I believe, thanks to Karen Ann Harlows, they reaffirmed the notion. I think you have to get in order to change even a single comma, a single word, you have to effectively get, I think it's 7/8 of the voting delegation at a national convention to change it. So that's what we ask for at a minimum. And then we all are on this libertarian journey, if you will. I just always point out that I'm probably one of the only people in the party that actually volunteered for Richard Nixon. True story. I was 12. And I, as I like to say when I enter a room, hi, my name is Pat. Hi, Pat. I was a neocon post 9/11, but I grew up, or I tried to grow up. But what's your take on the libertarian candidates and some of the new entrees? Someone like a Lincoln Chafee.
Oh, someone like Chafee. So as a party member, I'm excited to have him join. I am excited to see our party grow. As a party member, I also will do exactly what everybody else does in this party and hold their feet to the fire when it comes to principle. Mm-hmm. Because I believe it is important that we hold each other to the fire. I mean, I'm not a fan of infighting, but I do believe it's important that we do that. We're the only party that does that. And that to me is kind of, I don't want to say special, but unique about us. I kind of take it as a badge of pride. We actually do the work to make sure our people are principals. That's kind of a different way to look at it. So I'm excited to have him here. I want him to learn. I want him to grow. I hope he does become grounded in our principles, and and that he learns from us and he takes that in. It's great to knock on doors and to donate money, but unless you believe in it, that's my always my query, because a lot of people give their blood, sweat, and tears years into this party, and don't get noticed, and that's where I hold him as a member of the party. As a communications director for Ruff Phillips, I welcome him to do whatever he pleases within the party.
We've had a couple of conversations in Rhode Island over the last couple of years because as a state party, we face some of the same challenges. Someone comes in, has the potential to get us some extra votes. We talk about philosophy versus viability. The way that, and I love your reaction is, the way that I like to portray it is, at this point in our party's growth in Rhode Island, it is far more important to be philosophically sound, as a libertarian is, than it is to be a viable candidate. Ultimately, we're looking for candidates to join us. We want everyone to join the party, but we want candidates to evoke a clear libertarian message and to have a displayed loyalty to that message. Skin in the game. There are times that will doom us in terms of elections. Absolutely.
Yeah, but at least we were honest. I'll be honest. When I see a Democratic socialist and up against a Republican who totes a liberty but votes tyranny, at least the Democratic socialist was honest about who he was.
Right.
You have to give some respect to that, and I believe that if we hold this party dear, if we hold liberty dear, we should be respectful to that, and to be bold about what we believe,
Right.
and to really put it out there and be unapologetic about it.
When you reflect back on past elections, we always talk about Weld. Can the party afford another Weld?
It depends on what's behind it. We put so much time and effort, money into what we do, and sometimes that time, money, and data is lost to somebody else, and they profited off of us, or they got the good side of it, right?
Right.
I believe if it's done incorrectly, it could really hurt us, but can I say 100% that would happen? No, I'm not a fortune teller. But I fear that, because I don't want to lose our principles. I don't want to lose what we've worked so hard for, what we were established under, what we're fighting for. So, and I believe that name recognition is great, but that's because people talk about those people. Actually going out there and holding our principles dear and doing the work and fighting, those are the people we should be talking about. It's up to us to make people have name recognition. That's up to us as Liberty people. We should be promoting everybody and what they're doing as much as possible, because that's how people find out about it, and that's how people also get involved. It's everybody talking.
You bring up a critical point. Once the convention happens, candidates are nominated. This seems like a silly question, but I don't mean it that way. How important is it on this election in particular, when there's a very real chance that we are going to nominate a grassroots libertarian candidate for the first time in a generation to run for the presidency of the United States, that we unify, that we come together, regardless of what the outcome was at the convention?
how do I feel about the chances? Or,
Do you how important and what do you feel the chances are?
well, I feel like the chances are good. I mean, because of grassroots movements, and we're seeing this in places like New York and Indiana, and I mean all these wins weren't by luck and name recognition, not at the local level. They were by hard work. They were by grassroots movements. That's what, we were founded on. So I think the opportunity, and I believe the opportunity, is a great one, because something Kim talks about is this all digging in, all doing the work, because this isn't about me. This is about all of us. If we remember that, and we can see at the local level how everyone pitching in can help win, can help impact things, can help change messaging, can help change legislation, and change change society. When we all pitch in, we all do that, it does win. And it might not be like tomorrow, but it wins.
Right. Let's talk about messaging. You're the communications director for the campaign. What are some of the areas, at least in the run, let's just say in the immediate sense, in the run up to the convention, what is some of the messaging that you're going to focus on? Have you elevated any of the major issues of the day to a primary status? What are you going to dwell on? And how are you? What's the plan? How do you get more people to know about Kim?
Well, there's a lot of questions.
I'm like that.
And that's a lot of stuff that I can't tell you just yet.
You share a little.
Under my hat.
Well, let's talk about South Carolina. All right, South Carolina was the first principal state debate.
Yeah.
Kim did very, very well there.
She did.
I mean, not a surprise to people who met her or know her, but
No.
I think there was a thought that other people would perhaps eclipse. Didn't happen. Why was that? And what message, if you haven't seen South Carolina or you're looking for clarity, what message did she convey that made her the winner, if you will, of the debate?
Well, if you haven't seen it and you like commentary, fun commentary, Muddy Waters, they have a piece. It's quite entertaining, and you get to listen to the debate, which is nice. Just for those people who haven't listened to it.
Right.
What stood out is that Kim was honest. Kim knows the purview of the job. She can talk about what she can actually do, not just like wave a magic wand and everything goes away, or not, say, I've got name recognition and just clamor over that. Because we have to be honest, even with name recognition, most of the time those people are only, they only have that name recognition in the Liberty Movement.
Right.
And regular voters don't know who they are. And that's what we forget sometimes because we're so into the Liberty Movement.
Right.
So name recognition, I mean, there's that. But what she has is she understands the position. She understands the passion that we all have for the party. She understands the platform. She agrees with it. And she wants to promote it. She wants to see it in our community. She wants to see it in our own lives. And we need the best possible messenger at the national level so that our lower ballot candidates next year aren't having to apologize for someone who isn't invested in our party, hasn't invested in our principles, and could possibly run away with our message. And we lose a little bit of that control and don't have the opportunity to say, hey, that's not what our party believes.
There were several times during the Johnson-Weld campaign, and I'll just, as I always do, I'll state I'm a big fan of Gary Johnson. Gary Johnson was the reason I'm here.
Yeah, Gary's a great guy.
Yeah, but there were times when there wasn't that boldness. They were apologetic. So, you know, you had a couple of opportunities there. The two that come to mind were the first appearance on Stossel, you know, during the Libertarian candidates debate. The first one in particular, where so many people were paying attention, and then of course the Aleppo moment. This is
Now Aleppo, I'll forgive him for, because so I am I was a Stossel nerd, and I got up really super early in the morning, and I'd watch Gary's interviews on the networks because I was up at 4 a.m. to go to work. And so I was actually watching the Aleppo thing, and what was interesting is he was 100% right, because everyone sees the 10-second clip and ignores the entire interview. So the interesting details about that is the interviewer himself said that even if he'd asked Hillary or Trump that same question, that they probably wouldn't have answered any differently, because prior to the conversation they were speaking, I believe, on organizations, and they were utilizing the letters instead of the full names.
right.
And so when he said Aleppo, most of us would have said Aleppo, like it was something. And what's really interesting is if you think more about the process of what had happened, it was the Syrian humanitarian crisis, and had been called that over 50 some times in the last year on that particular station, on that broadcast channel. And had only been mentioned 3 times within like the last 6 months as Aleppo. So people knew it as Syrian humanitarian crisis. So imagine sleeping 3 hours, being asked an odd question after talking about some opposite topic,
Right.
and still not having the right answer. So when people bring up Aleppo, all I calmly say is, well, it is clear to me that you did not watch the entire episode, but you watched the CNN clip that was played on Fox News.
Absolutely. But getting back to Stossel, you know, there were 2 moments in Stossel, you know, the bake the cake moment and, you know, would you legalize heroin? What in those situations, because Kim, there's a very real chance Kim will be in those situations. How does Kim handle that? How do you guys, as a political campaign? Those are 2, getting back to one of our original points here in the show. We will be asked questions that Republicans and Democrats would never be asked. No one would ever ask a Democratic or Republican candidate, do you believe heroin should be legalized?
Right?
Right. But you and I agree that it absolutely should be. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, there's no chance whatsoever when, you know, that folks are going to ask a Democrat or Republican about freedom of association and being put in that unique position of having to interpret. It's a pretty difficult situation. You know, do you bake the cake? You know, Mir Duopolis would probably spontaneously combust after that question. I'm assuming Kim is going to just answer forthrightly.
Oh, I have an easy answer for this one. As Kim always does, she will answer with grace and facts.
Excellent.
That's always our simplest plan that I can give you.
Excellent.
Yeah, and that's what I do. What I do respect about her is it's everything she puts out there is factual. None of it is to get you to vote per emotion, like we see in the Democrats and Republicans. She knows what she's talking about, and she, like I said before, she understands the position, so she's always going to reflect back on that.
Interesting. No, that's certainly been my experience, both when she's been on the show and then watching her. You've got a pretty broad range of people running for this nomination.
Yes.
You know, it's. Any other strategies you want to share, or I mean, how?
No.
Oh, come on, it's nice to share.
I have lost your mind.
Listen, I'm gonna ask. Every now and then, people will answer, and we all go.
You can ask. You're not getting nothing but marshmallows and Cracker Jacks from me.
Wow, I'll take that. No, that's great stuff. So your final thought on the controversial entrance of Mr. Chafee. If you were in Mr. Chafee's shoes, would you have run? Now remember, he still has not announced formally. He is, you know, it is still technically, my understanding, a pre-announcement phase. Would you have run, or would you have taken time to build up, I don't know, more of a libertarian resume?
I don't know how I want to answer this question. As someone obviously who's running, who's in a campaign running against him, if he were to announce, as well as someone as a member of this party, the thing about representing our party is that people need to be able to trust you. And not knowing him and not knowing what he will do after seeing some of his voting record and the things he's supported, trust is not there. And for us to hand over the top ticket of our party to him, I believe his chances are very small. I believe it'd be smarter for him to build trust within this party and to show he's here to stay. Because we've been told by many people, I'm here to stay, and it didn't happen. So that would be my advice to him.
Do you think Weld is permanently ruined? I mean, how profound is the impact of the, and I'll use the biblical analogy of Weld being Peter going into the garden and denying 3 times the Libertarian Party.
I think it only impacts how much you actually care about it. And when it comes to Weld, I don't particularly care. So it doesn't impact me at all.
Okay. Well, fair enough.
I got too much work to do.
No, that's probably putting aside all the drama of the past, the recent past, is probably the only way to not just prosper as a libertarian, but survive, because we have so much drama. We have.
Keep us on our toes. We're very debate ready.
Excellent. Well, again, I appreciate you joining us tonight. I hope you'll take my suggestion and think about it over the next year or so.
Not going to happen.
Can we have a draft? How about a draft the errands movement?
I am not the politician. I am the bulldog in the background.
That's a great place to be. Well, again, I salute your contributions to the party. One of the great aspects of the show is that there is a great nucleus of activists, and there's shades of gray, differences in opinion on some of the theories and the philosophies, but ultimately they're all good people and they all work very hard for the party, regardless of caucus or feelings on immigration or whatever. One of the
It's the best caucus and the only caucus that really matters is, and I'm going to be pretty, and I never do this, but I'm going to be very biased in this. Mm-hmm. It's the Waffle House caucus, and if you're not in it, then it's really sad. I'm just putting that out there for my Waffle House caucus brothers and sisters.
All right. Well, the sad part here in New England is that the nearest Waffle House, and I think I should be allowed in simply because I know this. All right. The nearest Waffle House, I believe, is Easton, Pennsylvania, which is really far away from here. And to wit, I've actually called, it's been a couple of years, but I called in my naivete the Waffle House Corporation to find out if, in fact, they were franchises available. And Waffle House is a company-owned store. So, again, as a New Englander, I would ask for an honorary, if you will, nomination for Waffle House, because I've been...
Well, you need to apply to the caucus, and we'll discuss this. We'll consider it.
All right. So, and I've been to Waffle Houses as far away as Mississippi. My most memorable Waffle House experience was in Pass Christian, Mississippi. A few years back, I was driving a truck from Florida to Dallas, and this was the one built right after Katrina. Because folks don't realize that Waffle House Corporation has actually got a quick response team to Waffle Houses that have been taken out by, Mother Nature, if you will. And one of the first, if you will, Griffith, one of the first spirits to arise in a broken community, is in fact a Waffle House. You know, they've got.
No, I'd say I'm rather lucky. The closest Waffle House to me is 5 miles.
Damn you!
So I get to live in the valley of the Waffle House.
All right, can you send me some grits, okay? Please, I need an intervention. All right.
Will do.
Okay. Well, listen, Erin Pyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Keep us apprised of the campaign. We'd love to have Kim on again soon. I know I'm working on some plans to get some conventional media for a handful of the Libertarian candidates for the nomination. We're going to do our best in Rhode Island to spread the word as best we can. And I look forward to a spirited, because I know if you're involved, it's going to be a spirited campaign. So
It's going to be a great time.
it's going to be a party, as we say up here. So,
You know, I offered the Nerf gun wars to the LNC for NOLA. I mean, if they totally want to take out some tension for Austin, I think it's still a perfect plan. Everybody using Nerf guns.
well, listen, the next meeting of the LNC, I know this because now I am and I say this with tongue planted firmly in cheek, I'm a member of the ruling body of the Libertarian Party, is in Reno. In Reno, and I invite.
No way.
I invite you and the Mr. Phillips was there and joined us. I spent quality time with Mr. Phillips over the weekend.
Yeah.
But it would be great to see you all out, because I can't think of a better place to sin than Reno, Nevada. There's something about it that just screams sin. And as libertarians, we can embrace. I'm looking forward to the convention there in 4 years, where we can embrace our dark side. Now I know that's tough
I will
because
be in Austin. I don't know about Reno. I'm not sure about Reno. But I will be in Austin, obviously.
excellent.
I kind of have to. I will get in trouble if I don't.
Well, tell us where folks can contribute, where they can find the Ruff Phillips 2020 campaign on social media and on the interwebs.
Yeah, right now we have we actually have a $500 match. We had someone who donated $500 just the other day, and
okay.
up until we'll give you $500, get 500 more. So we're pushing through that like for these next 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the perfect time because it takes money to travel. It takes money to get branding and materials and to build data systems and things that are important to campaigns. Those are important to us, and we need our supporters to help us in that. Every little dollar counts. So you can go to ruffphillips2020.com, click on the donations tab, and go through that. If you have any problems, you can always email me, communications@ruffphillips2020.com. But you can also go to our volunteer tab, and our lovely field directors and their assistant, who is marvelous, will reach out to you and get you in the right department and with the right skills, because we want to make sure that what you're doing is something that you actually like doing. Because nobody likes volunteering for something they don't like. I mean, I love messaging. If somebody put me in policy, I'd be like, no, God, please don't put me there. But yeah, so you can go to ruffphillips2020.com to donate and volunteer. And make sure you like our pages on Twitter, Facebook. We have Instagram. We have Pinterest. We have all the fun stuff. Make sure you reach out to us any way possible, and we're ready to answer your questions and get you involved.
Last quick question. Has Kim got any more debates coming up that she'll be attending in person? You guys working on that still? Or?
I believe she's in Georgia in January.
Mm-hmm.
We have schedule getting developed. We've got our tour managers helping us with that currently. Getting all that lined up, and we'll be getting graphics out of what we'll be doing, so it's easy for all of us to share and spread that information and let people know where she'll be at.
All right, super. Great talking to you, buddy. We'll see each other down the campaign trail. All right?
All right. See you guys soon.
All right, Erin Pyle, uber volunteer, super libertarian, joining us from the bunker, from the Ruff Phillips 2020 bunker. Again, ruffphillips2020.com. There is a matching gift going on, so if you're inclined to support, even a little bit will help. Please log into them. That match is going, what, through the end of the weekend?
Till Monday.
Till Monday. All right, so you got to Monday. Payday was today. Hope for a little bit. Give up that latte. Give up maybe that extra burger. Donate to a campaign. Help spread
Give
liberty.
up a value meal for a value candidate.
Excellent. Listen, we'll see you soon, buddy.
Thank you so much.
We're going to take another quick break right now. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center. Deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. It's a kind of a light chill to the air tonight up here in New England, getting ready for Thanksgiving. And then we come into really the best time of year in New England. Of course, that's late fall, early winter. You know, restaurants, people are out and about tonight. Get out while you can before the storms hit. Party a little bit downtown. There's more places to sin, I believe, in Providence than anywhere in America. Again, Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And you can find everything you need in life at coalitionradio.us. We're going to take a quick break and come back for just a brief few closing minutes. We'll be right back. And we're back. We're taking a little bit of an early end to the show tonight. A reflection on Thanksgiving. We have a lot to be thankful here in Rhode Island. Wonderful people, wonderful culture, great universities. We should not allow negativity, even for a hardened cynic like myself, to overcome a genuine appreciation for the good things that we have. So when we criticize and challenge the status quo, of course the status quo replacing transparency is the most abused set of words in the English language this year. I think after this year, the word term status quo will be voted off the island. That's not to say that we don't have a wonderful life here in Rhode Island, the Northeast, or America at large. It's more of a disappointment, and I'm being moderate here, for what we could have. We talked to a couple of folks tonight who are truly leaders in education. And if one thought, one concept, one philosophy should scream out at people, is that the folks, despite accusations from the educational industry, these folks are not elitists. They're not interested in being corporatists. They are not looking to take. They are simply looking to share opportunities with a vastly underserved part of the community. They're willing to recognize shortcomings, disappointments, and the tragedies of what could be and what is not. For communities around the country, regardless of race, religion, sexual identity, history, geography, and they're simply saying we can do a whole lot better. And if there's a common mantra across all of our guests tonight, in fact, most of the guests we have on this show, it's a genuine desire to simply do better. So when we give thanks this week and Thanksgiving, we should be thankful for our own individual circumstances, all of the good. But we should always be thankful that despite our shortcomings, despite our challenges, there lives within all of us the opportunity to simply do better for oneself and for others. One can celebrate the self while elevating others. One can celebrate individuality while at the same time building community. That's really the libertarian mantra. The oldest cliche, raising all boats, takes place with individual responsibility, individual initiative, and as we like to say in certain sectors, taking human action. I wish everyone a wonderful Thanksgiving. We will be here Friday night to do our regular show. In the coming weeks, we're going to be focusing on Yemen. We'll continue to have conversations with our favorite professor about the border, what's really happening down there, the economics, the strife, the politics. We'll begin to ramp up our coverage of the election. We'll start looking at candidates like Bloomberg, Deval Patrick, the late entrance into the race. And of course, as always, we'll be Libertarian Fabulous. God bless. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next Friday.